Where are you going?
To work, like every day.
What about breakfast? Your cousin is in a meeting. Can't you lend a hand? Sorry, sis, I've got more important things to do. The short exchange, seemingly ordinary, was actually the first puzzle piece of a picture waiting to be fully painted. For 17 years, Emily Harris had lived in two parallel worlds, one shaped by pitying glances from her family and society, and the other, a silent empire she built from the ashes of every rejection. Emily, the little girl from Ohio, had once been seen by her parents as a daydreamer with a nearly empty bank account. She moved to Manhattan with only a suitcase, an old laptop, and an idea everyone in her family labeled delusional. They had said, NFTs are a bubble, honey. You better wake up before it's too late. But Emily didn't need permission to believe in herself. While her college peers were drowning in student debt, she immersed herself in blockchain, 3D graphics, and algorithms for pricing digital assets. She slept on an old couch in a studio apartment barely bigger than a walk-in closet. But her mind was always flying toward the future. The name Emily Harris didn't show up anywhere in her family's version of success. Not on the award wall, not in the group chat where everyone discussed real estate investments, not even in passing during family birthday parties. They only remembered her when they needed a babysitter or someone to touch up a PowerPoint real quick. But that was Emily's strategy. Low-key moves, high-key wins. She knew that sometimes the best way to answer doubt was to let success speak for itself. In the chaotic world of NFTs, where a new failure made headlines every week, Emily chose not to make noise, but to make value. Every product she released wasn't just a piece of art, it was a self-contained ecosystem, its own marketplace, proprietary security system, and most importantly, real people paying real money to own it. Success didn't come like fireworks, but like a rising tide, silent, steady, and unstoppable. In her third year in New York, Emily bought her first penthouse, under her company's name. In her fifth year, she funded 3 art scholarships at her old college, anonymously. By year 10, when her net worth crossed the billion-dollar mark, she was still driving a beat-up Toyota, wearing faded t-shirts, living like she was barely making ends meet. Then, one early spring morning, with sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Park Avenue penthouse, Emily held a gold-embossed invitation in her hand. Emily Harris is cordially invited to the 40th annual Harris family reunion at Uncle John's house in Minnesota. No one in the family knew that in just 3 days, Forbes would run the article, "The New Face of the Digital Art Revolution, Emily Harris's $13.7 billion NFT empire." If someone had asked her why she hid her success for so long, she would have replied with a smile. Because truthfully, no one cares about your dream as much as you do. And if you believe in it long enough, deep enough, one day that truth will make the whole world stop and stare. Emily's story wasn't just a shocking twist in the final act, it was a living blueprint of belief and grit. It teaches that not every success story needs to be loud, and not everyone deserves to witness your dream while it's still taking root. Some things are better kept hidden until they bloom, bright, undeniable, and unforgettable. That day was coming, and this time, Emily Harris wouldn't walk into the family reunion as a forgotten shadow. She would enter like a storm, carrying truth, freedom, and a story no one could ignore. That morning, everything unfolded as usual, if there was such a thing as usual in the life of an anonymous billionaire. Emily sat at her ebony wood desk, eyes gazing through nearly 3-meter-high glass panes overlooking the bustling Park Avenue below. The espresso cup in her hand was still steaming, but the phone beside her had been vibrating nonstop for the past 45 minutes. She knew why. Someone in the media had leaked the article, one day ahead of Forbes' official release. The headline was clear among the hundreds of incoming messages. Emily Harris, the hidden NFT billionaire revealed after 17 years in the shadows. There was no doubt about it. The game had changed. Emily let out a quiet laugh. Not the satisfied kind, but the kind that acknowledged how life always knew how to pick the most brutal timing with uncanny precision. 3 days from now, the annual family reunion would take place. She had planned to reveal everything then, exactly as scripted in her mind for over a year. But now, with just one click from Forbes, the biggest secret of her life was no longer hers alone. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Harris, your brother, Mr. Nathan, is on line 1. Of course, it was Nathan, always the first to react in situations that tarnish the family image. Emily pressed the button, and his voice came through, tight as a bowstring. Emily, what the hell is this? She didn't respond immediately, letting his heavy breathing carry through the receiver. Finally, she said calmly, as if discussing the weather, "It's the truth, and you're about to see a lot more of it." More? You're a billionaire? NFTs? $13.7 billion? Why? Why hide all this from the family? Emily took a sip of espresso, her eyes still following the thin column of steam rising into the morning light. She recalled every family meeting, every look of half pity, half mockery whenever she spoke about digital art or the future of blockchain in creative industries. She remembered how Nathan once said, "That girl's been reading too much nonsense on Reddit again." She answered softly, "Because everyone believed I would fail, and I didn't want to waste time proving them wrong. I wanted to spend that time making it real." Silence on the other end. Then Nathan sighed, this time without the usual air of superiority. "So, what now?" "I'm preparing for the reunion. I'm still coming, but this time it'll be different." After the call ended, Emily opened her laptop. Hundreds of emails poured into her inbox, from venture capital firms, art foundations, television networks, podcast producers, TEDx events, even a dinner invitation from the president. But one name made her pause: Robert Langford, her father's longtime business partner. 4 years ago, he had been the one to outright reject her proposal. Back then, she only asked for a small investment, $1 million to expand her NFT platform for independent artists. Robert had scoffed and escorted her out of the office. "Emily, this is the real world, not a video game." Yet now, the subject line of his email read, "Strategic Partnership Opportunity with Harris Digital Empire." She didn't open it, just marked it "Read" and kept scrolling. Not because she was still angry, but because she no longer needed them. That afternoon, the media went wild. CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, all lined up for interviews with the mysterious NFT queen. Twitter exploded with the hashtag #Emily Harris revealed. A few famous artists who had worked with her anonymously began speaking up. The NFT market surged within hours of the article's circulation, and the value of Harris Digital Empire increased by $1.2 billion during the afternoon trading session. But what caught Emily's attention most was a short message in the family group chat. "Emily, is this real? You built an entire empire and no one knew? Call mom right now." She set the phone down, eyes narrowing slightly as the golden light of sunset touched her hair. The truth was no longer her secret weapon. It had become the torch shining into the darkest corners of doubt her family had ever projected onto her. Now they would all have to relearn how to see Emily, not through bias, but through the undeniable clarity of fact. In 3 days, she would walk into that reunion not just with confidence, but with the power of someone who knew exactly where she stood, at the top, with the whole world finally seeing who she really was. The following afternoon, as the sunset painted half the Manhattan sky red, Emily Harris stood quietly in the open kitchen of her penthouse, a cup of tea in her hand, now completely cold. Outside, the city remained as bustling as ever, but inside her, there was an uncanny stillness, as if the eye of a storm had just passed, leaving behind a wordless void. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Harris, your mother is in the lobby. She refuses to leave." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. She had known this moment would come, but hadn't expected it so soon. She walked over to the surveillance monitor. The woman speaking tensely with the concierge was indeed Mrs. Elaine Harris, her mother, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, leather clutch in hand, but her face was no longer composed as usual. There was something different in her eyes, no longer condescension or fatigue, but confusion, doubt, and maybe hurt. "Send her up," Emily said softly. When the private elevator opened, Mrs. Elaine entered without saying a word, her eyes sweeping across the apartment as if trying to reorient herself to the daughter she thought was still living in a corner of Brooklyn, needing support every month. "Oh my God, Emily," she whispered, stepping back half a pace. "This is your home?" "It is, Mom," Emily replied calmly. "Not a rented apartment to fake being okay. This is my real life." Elaine looked around. The walnut floors, the glass walls overlooking Central Park, a real Basquiat casually hanging on the wall like it was just another decoration. Every detail in the apartment screamed one thing. Her daughter wasn't just doing fine. She was thriving beyond every success standard the family had ever set. So all these years, you were pretending? Her mother asked, voice trembling. Emily set the cup of tea down. Not pretending, Mom. I just let everyone believe the story they wanted to believe. The story where I'm the unsuccessful daughter in need of saving. It was easier than trying to explain something no one wanted to hear. You drove that old Toyota for nearly a decade. Because I chose to. I told you and Dad from the start, I didn't need money. I needed to be trusted. Her mother collapsed into the white leather chair. And that article in Forbes, it's real? 13.7 billion is just an estimate, Emily said gently. The actual number is close to 15 billion now. Elaine brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Then, as if remembering something, she looked at Emily searchingly. But your father, he still thinks you're lost. He said that digital art stuff was a scam. Emily sat down across from her. I know, I remember exactly what he said. No one pays money for pictures drawn with a computer mouse, Emily. You're wasting your future. Silence filled the room. Are you angry? Her mother asked. Emily looked at her, and for the first time, there was no bitterness in her eyes. Number. Because if I had never been underestimated, maybe I wouldn't have tried so hard. Every time they mocked me, it pushed me to prove the opposite. And I did. Elaine stared at her for a long time. We were wrong. We never asked what you really needed. We just wanted you to live within the frame we thought was safe. Emily nodded. Sometimes safety is a gilded cage, Mom. Then she stood up, walked to her desk, and pulled out a folder. Do you remember the time I asked Dad to invest? The project he said was child's play not worth a dime? Her mother nodded. This is the 2022 financial report. If he had put in $1 million back then, his share today would be worth over $280 million. Elaine took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. Not from regret, but from the realization that she had never truly believed in the daughter she gave birth to. You did it, without any of us. No, Mom, Emily whispered. I did it because none of you believed I could. As her mother left, Emily escorted her to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, her mother said softly, filled with emotion, Your father. He's going to have a hard time accepting this. But today, I see it now. I really see you. The doors closed. Emily stood still for a long while, then returned to her room, picked up her phone, and typed a message into the family group chat. We'll be seeing each other in 3 days. Brace yourselves and dress well. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't shrinking back. The next step wasn't about shocking them. It was about living fully, openly, and proudly. 2 days before the reunion, Emily Harris stepped into the executive boardroom of the Harris Digital Empire Building, 58th floor, where the transparent glass reflected the entire New York sky. The atmosphere here was different from the outside world, sharp, precise, and running smoothly like the engine of a global empire. But today, all plans were shifting. Not because of the market, but because of family. On the large screen appeared the meeting title, Operation The Reunion. Rebecca, Emily turned to her closest assistant, I want this year's family reunion to be an experience no one in my family can forget. And even more, one they can't deny. Rebecca nodded, fingers flying across the iPad. Regarding the venue, I've relocated the entire event from your uncle's estate in Minnesota to Sunset Haven Island. Private jets will pick everyone up from their cities, and Rolls-Royces will take them to the airport. NDAs have been drafted, and all resort staff have signed. Everything is fully confidential. Emily smiled. Sunset Haven, a 500-acre island in the Caribbean that she purchased last year after closing a $2 billion deal with a Japanese tech conglomerate, was now the stage for her final reveal. Private rooms for each guest, she said. In every room, I want a printed copy of the email where they declined to invest. the current share valuation if they had said yes, and a photo of me from the time they called me a failure. Rebecca couldn't hide a grin. Classic you. And I want each villa to feature one of my NFT artworks, the ones they called digital trash. Below it, the latest auction value. The more shocking, the better. That afternoon, Emily sat alone in the design studio, where all her greatest ideas had first taken shape. On the table was a 3D model of Sunset Haven Island. The main resort, private docks, helipad, mini theater, open-air amphitheater, and a central hall, where she would reintroduce herself to the entire Harris family. As the sunset bathed the model in gold, a clear thought came to her. This wasn't just a retaliation. It was a rebirth ceremony. Emily was no longer the one seeking to be accepted by the family. She was the one rewriting the definitions of value, success, and trust. That evening, one final detail was added: the screening room for the documentary The Hidden Years. It was a 12-minute video directed by Emily herself, capturing her journey from a dingy studio apartment in Brooklyn to being celebrated on global auction stages. The footage showed sleepless nights, losses, isolation, and each step of reinvention. But the climax was a single interview question posed to her. If there's one thing I've learned from all those years of being underestimated, it's this: you don't need to be recognized to make history. You just need to believe hard enough not to quit. Rebecca, seated beside her, had teary eyes when the video ended. Are you sure you want to show them this? It's powerful, but also deeply personal. Emily gently squeezed her assistant's wrist. It's because it's personal that they need to see it. She stood and walked to the large glass door, where the glowing Harris Empire sign reflected in her eyes against the city's night sky. The next morning, she sent out official invitations to every family member, not through the group chat this time, but by genuine leather envelopes, stitched with gold thread, sealed with red wax bearing her emblem. The content contained just one sentence: "This trip will change the way you see me, and yourselves. Get ready to look back on the past with entirely new eyes." Emily sealed the final envelope, then looked up at the calendar. Only 36 hours left. She was no longer the girl who cried after being called a useless dreamer. She was now the director of a truth set to be revealed at the right time, the right way, and impossible to ignore. Her phone buzzed softly. "Your father is trying to reach you," he said. "We need to talk. Can't wait until the reunion." Emily typed a few words, then deleted them. Finally, she sent back one simple reply: "No, Dad. This time, I'll be the one to speak. Everything will be said when the whole family is present." She hit send. The curtain had been lifted, and Emily Harris, the woman once seen as the biggest failure of the Harris family, was about to become the undeniable center of a family reunion no one would ever forget. The fateful morning began with the soft roar of jet engines across the deep blue Caribbean sky. One by one, Rolls-Royces quietly pulled up in front of the Harris family estates in different cities, picking up family members dressed in tailored suits, polished leather shoes, and luggage packed with one single thought: Emily's probably just trying to show off. They had no idea that within a few hours, their definitions of success, failure, and the right path would be completely shattered. On the way to the private airstrip, Nathan, the eldest brother, Harvard alum, now CEO of a real estate firm, kept checking his phone. In the family group chat, everyone was asking nonstop, why is Emily hosting the reunion on an island? Who even does that? And is she really rich enough to own a private jet? The answers weren't clear, but when they stepped inside the gold-accented cabin of the Gulfstream, G700 with Harris Digital Empire boldly printed along the fuselage, the truth started to unfold in the smallest of details. Champagne was served in baccarat crystal glasses. The interior blended Art Deco elegance with interactive technology. A digital painting appeared on the main screen with the caption, "Artwork, silence is also an answer. Last traded price, 2.6 million USD. No one said a word, but their eyes said everything: shock, curiosity, and unease. When the plane landed on Sunset Haven Island, they stepped out beneath a blazing sun. In front of them stood a modern resort nestled among palm trees and turquoise sea. A large stone monument shaped into a stylized letter E, Emily's initial, stood proudly in the welcome plaza. At its base was a familiar quote: "Success isn't something you inherit, it's something you dare to define." Amy, the youngest sister, always proud of her Hamptons home and six-figure salary, whispered, "She really built an entire world?" They were guided into the central lobby, an open space with towering glass ceilings, marble floors, and Emily's NFT artworks displayed around the room. Beneath each piece was a screen showing the transaction value, date of sale, and an email from the very family member who had once declined to invest. The rejection was printed boldly. "Sorry, Emily, this doesn't seem like a serious direction." Not a single word was spoken. A manager in a white suit smiled and greeted them. "Welcome. Please head to your private rooms. Inside, you'll find a personalized 3-day itinerary, a tailored information packet, and an invitation to tonight's screening." Nathan picked up his folder, flipping to the first page. Nathan Harris, in 2016, declined a $500,000 investment in the EHA platform. Current equivalent share value, 86.3 million US dollars. He collapsed into a chair, heart pounding. Amy remained seated, silently reading through the list of collections that had once been sent to her email, paintings she had once scrolled past and remarked, "Who buys this stuff?" At 7 p.m. sharp, family members gathered in the grand hall near the beach. The stage was made of glass, allowing the setting sun to stream through, bathing the entire room in a glowing amber hue. Emily walked out. No glamorous gown, no crown, just a white suit, her hair tied high, her eyes shining with the same fire as the first time she stood in front of a classroom at 24, back when she talked about digital art and her professor doused her with cold water. "This is science fiction." "Hi, everyone," she began, voice calm and firm. "It's been a while since we've all been together, and this time I want to be the one to tell the story that everyone once ignored." The hall was silent. Behind her, the screen flickered to life. The documentary, The Hidden Years, began. Footage of Emily carrying coffee in a snowy Brooklyn winter, coding at 2 a.m., her bank account jumping from $12.46 to $100,000 after a first transaction. Then scenes from her first exhibition in Tokyo, her first partner in Switzerland, and the moment Forbes first called her the woman redefining the art market. When the film ended, Emily turned back to face her family. "This isn't a revenge story. This is the first time I'm letting the family know who I really am." Her father, Mr. Charles Harris, seated in the front row, had said nothing until now, but then he stood. His voice was deep but visibly shaken. "You hid all of this from us." Emily answered calmly, "Not hid, Dad. I just didn't want to be labeled before I had the chance to grow." He sat down in silence. Her mother looked at her, eyes watery, clutching her husband's hand. Amy exhaled, chuckling lightly. "You are the biggest plot twist of my life." Laughter erupted, and for the first time in many years, Emily was no longer the forgotten shadow at the family reunion. She was the center, the one redefining value. The evening closed with an outdoor buffet under the stars. The sound of waves, the clinking of glasses echoing in the breeze, and in the distance, stage lights being set up for tomorrow's special art showcase. But for Emily, tonight's moment was already enough, because for the first time she didn't need to prove anything, just to be present, and that to her was the greatest victory. The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. She walked barefoot across the cold wooden floor, pulled back the large window curtains, and looked out at the sea. The sky was tinged with pale gold, the still water mirroring the sky like glass. Last night had been a storm, not one of anger, but of truth revealed. And this morning, the air felt weightless, like a page freshly turned. She stepped into the central dining room, where an American-style breakfast buffet had already been set. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice, and richly brewed coffee. But what caught her attention wasn't the food. It was the eyes of those who had arrived early. No more awkwardness, no more judgmental glances. They looked at her as if seeing someone new, or rather, seeing for the first time the person they had long thought they understood. Her mother, Elaine, was the first to stand. She pulled out the chair beside her, gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, and said, You've made me rethink a lot of things about the way I used to impose, thinking it was love. Emily nodded slightly, not needing to say anything more. That softness, in her mother's eyes, voice, and gestures, was something she hadn't felt in nearly 2 decades. Nathan, the eldest brother, who had judged her the harshest, stepped over with a cup of coffee. I still can't believe it, he shook his head, but I also can't deny it. And that's what I'm trying to relearn, knowing when to stay silent instead of passing judgment. Emily took the cup, allowing herself a half smile. That's a good first step, she said quietly. Amy, the younger sister who once flaunted her Hamptons home and six-figure salary, sat across from her, sipping a latte. Her face today wasn't as carefully made up as usual, and the spark of "I'm always right" was no longer in her eyes. After a few quiet minutes, she said, "Maybe I was a little petty. Not because I didn't believe in you, but because I was afraid you'd succeed more than I did. And that was hard to accept." Emily tilted her head, looking directly into Amy's eyes. "You're not the only one who ever felt that way." No one cried. No one gave a tearful apology. But in the way they spoke quietly, helped themselves to more scrambled eggs, or passed each other the syrup, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. Emily was no longer the outsider. She now sat at the center of the table, not because of wealth, but because of a resolve and strength no one could ignore. That afternoon, Emily took everyone on a tour of Sunset Haven Island, but this time not as a host showing off, but as a guide sharing her pride. They passed small studios where young artists worked, fully funded by Emily to follow their passions, through an open-air art exhibition where digital pieces were displayed amidst nature, blending technology with trees and grass, through the applied blockchain research hub where she and engineers were developing a secure trading platform for independent artists worldwide. When they stood on an observation deck facing the sea, her father, Mr. Charles Harris, for the first time since setting foot on the island, walked over to his daughter. He didn't bring a speech, didn't carry his usual instructive tone. He was just a father standing before the child he had once misunderstood, now forced to take a step back and see her with different eyes. "I used to think you were just rebelling," he said, his voice low. "I used to be proud of what I built. But today, I realize you've built an entire world without tearing mine down. You just chose a different path." Emily turned to him, the sea breeze catching her hair. "I never wanted to prove you wrong, Dad. I only wanted to prove I wasn't wrong." Her father nodded. No more words were needed. In his eyes, for the first time, there was genuine admiration, not born from fame, but from depth. That evening, during a light dinner by the beach, everyone was more relaxed, more connected. No more doubt, no more comparison. They shared old memories, laughed, reminisced, and fell silent together watching the large screen replay the moment Emily signed her first $1 million deal. Just her and a glowing computer screen in the night. At the end, Emily stood and raised her glass. "It's been a long journey to stand here today, but what I treasure most now isn't the recognition. It's the feeling of being heard. Thank you for giving me that." Glasses clinked. The sound of waves rolled in like a background score for the most peaceful moment she'd ever had with her family. And Emily knew. The storm had passed. It was time now to embrace the sunshine, as the truth had finally been seen, and family was beginning to rebuild, one brick at a time. The third morning on Sunset Haven Island was gentle but no less sacred. The first light of day filtered through the straight rows of palm trees, casting a warm golden glow onto the stone path leading to the operations center of the complex, where Emily Harris had planned to hold the final strategy meeting, not with partners, not with investors, but with her own family. This was no longer an ordinary family vacation, but the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Emily, but for all those who had once defined her by their limits. Everyone arrived on time. Her mother wore a soft emerald green dress, her father a simple suit, not the flashy formal type he usually preferred. Nathan came with a folder in hand, his expression no longer stiff. Amy had her hair tied up, a white blouse on, and her gaze no longer held competition, but curiosity and respect. Emily stood before them, with no podium, no massive screen, just a simple board behind her bearing the words, "From Belief to Legacy." Thank you all for staying until the final day, she began. I could have hosted this meeting with any board of directors or advisory committee, but I wanted to start with the most important place, family. She placed a personalized folder in front of each person. Inside were not contracts or financial reports, but a plan titled Legacy 2.0 Inheriting Without Limits. I don't just want to leave behind money or fame, Emily said. I want to leave behind a foundation, an ecosystem for those who were once like me, doubted, dismissed, but who never gave up. She presented the new investment fund named after her mother, the Elaine Grant Foundation, to support young girls pursuing tech-based art. She mentioned a mentorship program led by Amy for women in creative finance. She proposed Nathan as a strategic advisor on real estate for a network of community art studios. And most importantly, she extended an invitation, not a demand, for the whole family to contribute to rebuilding the future. The atmosphere was initially stunned, but quickly filled with emotion. Mrs. Elaine burst into tears. You didn't just forgive us, you're inviting us to be part of your dream. Emily held her mother's hand. Because I know, some doors can't be opened from just one side. Her father, a man who had always lived by the principle of right or wrong, cleared his throat and placed his hand on the folder. If I was the one who began the Harris legacy, then perhaps now it's time for you to continue it, in your own way. Emily looked at him. No words of gratitude, no tears, just a small nod. Between them, nothing more needed to be said. Everything necessary had already been exchanged through their eyes. That entire morning, they sat together, not as a family council, but as a group of people learning how to see each other with new eyes. They divided roles not by hierarchy, but by ability. No one was asked to abandon their old path, only to align with a shared vision, where value was no longer measured by status, but by positive impact. By noon, when the meeting ended, Rebecca walked in and handed Emily a small wooden box. Someone sent this to you this morning, she said. Emily opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink still fresh. It was from one of her old professors at university, the one who had once bluntly said she was wasting an Ivy League finance degree on a fantasy. Emily, I read your story. I'm sorry I didn't see what you saw sooner, but today I'm the one relearning. From you. Emily gently folded the letter and smiled. That afternoon, her family left Sunset Haven on private helicopters. No more scrutinizing glances, no more what-ifs or should-haves. They left with respect, with new plans, and with the belief that Emily Harris was not just a symbol of success, but someone laying the foundation for a new definition of legacy, a legacy of courage, intelligence, and compassion. When everything quieted down again, Emily returned to her studio, where the late-day light filtered through the glass and cast a faint rainbow across the floor. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began to write. The next chapter doesn't begin with rebellion, but with a conscious choice, not to let the past shape the dream. I've been silent long enough. Now it's time for my voice to lead the way for others. Outside the window, the sun touched the sea, turning the entire sky crimson. And Emily knew. Not only had her family finally seen who she truly was, but the world was about to enter an era where her voice, at last, would be heard. No more hiding, no more hesitation, only the truth, and absolute freedom.